that even though we haven't yet posted last month's recording, but we have it and we will. We are now recording. You should have an indication on your screen that you're recording, and I'm supposed to tell you that. You have been told. Welcome to the February 21 Utah Microsoft Users Group. We're excited to get Eric Raff to spend some of his precious time with us talking about the things that we can do to secure our own tenants. We'll get to that shortly, but first, some housekeeping. I normally have slides with the names of your board, but I see a lot of us here. Greg is here, JR is here, a few others, Ron is here. If you have a question for the board, drop it in the chat, which we have validated works, and we'll do our best to answer it. For housekeeping purposes, I would ask that if you are not actively participating, and Eric, I'm going to go ahead and take a leap of faith and say that you welcome questions at any time. Absolutely. And so if you're not asking a question, if you're not interacting, then go on mute so that we don't hear what's going on in your background. I will do the same. And we are always looking for topic suggestions. We don't have, to the best of my knowledge, a topic lined up for March. So if there's something that you would like to learn, drop a note in the chat or send me an email. I'm all over the internet. Just put my name in, and we will do our very best to find someone as good at that as Eric is at security. And I recognize that's a very high bar. We'll do our best. We invite you to spread the word, and so invite your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, your family members to join us next month. We try and have a lively discussion, and I think this is stuff that is important. We only pick stuff that is important. We are planning a live, in-person, in the same space event towards the end of the summer. We're thinking end of August, 1st of September time frame. And so be on the lookout for that. We will, of course, monitor and watch closely what's going on with COVID. My hope is that with some of us getting vaccinated, the numbers will go down, it'll get safe. It'll get to be safe to get into the same space again. And so keep your fingers crossed, and if that's appropriate, we will do that. Any questions before we turn the floor over to Eric? Okay, so Eric, we didn't ask you to do an introduction, and I didn't think to invite somebody that knows you to come and do the introduction, but I will say that I've never had anyone go to a Raff show and not come back blown away talking about what a genius Eric is. And so with that send-off, Eric, you have no choice but to deliver in an amazing 45 to 60 minutes of security. Feel free to interrupt him with questions. You've got water there, you're good to go. I will turn the screen over.
Water. I'm good, yeah.
There you go. I'll turn the screen over to you, and you take us off. And at the end, we'll do a little bit of close up. If you have questions, like I said, interrupt, ask, put them in the chat. If you have questions that are not related to this topic that you want to save for the end, we'll stick around and we can do those then. Eric, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you all. It's great to be with you. I know a lot of you. I hope this isn't all a repeat for some of you, but there's a couple of new things that I'll talk about in here. So I have to level set a little bit. I know that last session you guys did some discussions on MFA, and so this session is mostly going to be talking about, hey, you've got MFA in place, you're good to go, right? And so we'll be talking into some of the other areas of a Microsoft 365 tenant that we need to look at from a security posture, okay? Really, we can take this conversation and this presentation wherever you guys want to take it. This is, I feel like this is a little different setting in the context that this is the user group and we want to talk about what you want to talk about, and whatever questions you have, feel free to shoot them our way, and we'll see how far we get through what I prepared, okay? So everyone can see my screen okay. We're talking the top 10 security considerations after you've rolled out MFA in your tenant. We all good here? All right, cool. So what we're going to do, introductions, the top 10-ish, demo time, and a summary. So basically, I've been at Journey Team. I had to do the math this morning. It'll be 7 years this April that I've been at Journey Team. And time flies. It doesn't feel like I've been here that long. Journey Team does a bunch of stuff, identity and access management, security, Microsoft 365, which includes the Office 365 suite, EMS, Windows 10, device management. We have teams that focus on SharePoint, Dynamics 365 or CRM, ERP, Business Central, Great Plains. We have a whole Power BI team that does reporting, dashboards, data warehousing, and a change management and user adoption team as well. So, Ed, did I miss anything there as far as who Journey Team is? Let's move on to the good stuff. How about that? All right, so quick review of your MFA. You have this on, right? So once again, we assume that you've got MFA turned on. We are gonna do a quick review of licensing. A lot of the stuff that we're gonna talk about today, you may need Azure ADP2 or the EMS E5 security add-on SKU. And then here's some 10 things that I threw on the list that we're gonna talk about. Security defaults, legacy protocols, guest accounts, enterprise apps, Azure portal settings, access reviews, PIM, MCAS policies, CA policies for admin roles, and saving your log files. Anything like that sound fun? Well, we're going to try to get through all 10 of those. So, rapid fire. First thing on the list, our security overview, like I said, is you may need Azure ADP2 for a lot of these things. I'll try to call those out as we get into this, okay? Security defaults. Licensing requirements for this is Microsoft's gift to you. If anyone attended our Business Tech Summit from 2020, I pulled some of the slides from that, so I didn't take the time to rebrand them. Sorry, you're going to get a repeat if you were in that. But Microsoft's gift to you, why do security defaults, what do they activate or enforce? Okay, how do I turn them on, when we should not use them? So that's what we're going to get into. So security defaults, Microsoft introduced these things called baseline protection policies in 2018. In 2019, they began to say, don't use those anymore. We're going to deprecate them. We're going to transition to security defaults. And now in 2020, they released security defaults. And what are security defaults in your tenant? Okay. Here's what they will do. They're one way to get every user to enroll in Azure multi-factor authentication. It leverages the Azure Identity Protection MFA enrollment policy, which is pretty cool. They can skip the enrollment if they want for up to 2 weeks, and then finally they'll have to enroll. They require administrators to perform MFA. That leverages the Azure ADP 1 feature. Once again, these are free for you in any tenant, regardless of what you need for licensing. Okay. They block legacy authentication protocols. That's a P1 feature. They require users to perform MFA whenever necessary, risky sign-in, etc. And your privileged activities, like when you're accessing the Azure portal, that has to be MFA. Check one box and piece of cake. Here we go. So this is where you turn them on, right? So if you go into the Azure Active Directory portal, go to properties, there's this enable security defaults. If you have a tenant, here, let's just take a quick look at my demo tenant here. Down here in the properties, is this too little? Is that too, let's go a little bigger. Manage security defaults here. I can enable these, and if you get this little message here, that's super teeny, I apologize, guys. If you get this little message here that says that you have conditional access policies enabled, you can't do this. Save is grayed out, okay? So this is the bad side of security defaults, when you should not use them. You already have conditional access policies in place. We'll talk about those a little bit. You need more fine-grained control over access. And so anything you can do with a CA policy, if you need that, then don't use security defaults, okay? Any of these use cases that a CA policy would cover you for. Okay? I need to exclude my service account that my multifunction printer is using to do MFA because it can't do MFA, okay? So that's basically security defaults. So any questions on that? Once again, it's a one check box. You turn it on. You can't turn it on if you have conditional access policies already enabled in the tenant. Okay. It's very rare that I have any size company at all that does use security defaults. Okay. But if you're a little teeny mom and pop shop, and not that that's bad, we all started there, right? If you're a little teeny mom and pop shop and you just want a great baseline set of security features, then go turn this on, okay? And expect everyone to get enrolled in MFA and all that stuff. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on MFA enrollment, but just as a quick point, if you are going to turn on security defaults, please, please, please go into the user settings over here and make sure that this setting right here, combined security registration experience, is turned on. This, like I said, is not assuming you have MFA on. I don't know if RJ covered this, but you definitely want this option turned on here to use the combined registration experience. Okay. All right. So that's tip number one, or point number one. Let's talk now about blocking legacy protocols. Security tip number two. First of all, what are legacy protocols? Our favorite friends from years gone by: SMTP, IMAP, POP, ActiveSync, Outlook Anywhere, the older Office clients, 2010, 2013. These are all using legacy protocols. Okay, now why do we care about blocking legacy protocols? Anyone want to come off mute and tell me they're listening and answer that question? Why do we want to block legacy protocols?
We're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of password spray attacks every hour, and they seem to be leveraging these types of protocols.
Exactly. So they're specifically hitting these protocols like SMTP authentication, and they're feeding in a username and a password. And if they get a successful authentication, they completely bypass multi-factor authentication. I don't care if you're enrolled in MFA and you have security defaults turned on, or a conditional access policy that says you have to MFA. Legacy protocols do not care. They just go right past MFA. So that's why you care about these. And to Kevin's point, I usually tell people I buy them lunch if I can get into your tenant and not see the fact that bad guys or bots or whatever are trying to get into your tenant through legacy protocols. It's happening all the time, all the day. Okay, so let's talk about how to do that. Okay, identify who's using it. So before you go turn this on, how are you going to find out who you're going to affect? And who's going to get pissed off because their native mail client is going to stop working all of a sudden? Okay, here's how we do that. Ready? You jump into your tenant, go to sign-ins, make sure you've got the new experience turned on. We're going to add a filter. We're going to look for a client app, and then we're going to drill into the client apps. And I want specific traffic that's coming in on all these legacy protocols. The big ones are POP and SMTP and IMAP and other clients. Other clients means the old Office suite. Okay, those are the big ones. Okay, ActiveSync can also come through this door, right? And so if you turn those on, this is my demo tenant. I could probably go look at my production tenant to give you some more real data. But in the last 24 hours, last 7 days, what do I want to see here? Okay. I think my demo tenant may have expired because I don't get 30 days of logs here. That's another point I'll be talking to you about. Okay. So this is how you see who's using legacy protocols in the environment. Okay. Anybody want to go see our, I don't know, let's go down this road. We like live demo.
So Eric,
yeah,
this is something that we're digging into as well. And one of the difficulties that we have is we're a fairly large tenant, and so we have a lot of logins using those protocols, and it's almost impossible to figure out which are the users and which are the bad guys, just because there's so many of them.
Okay, so let's live a little more dangerously here, guys. I'm going to jump into my Journey Team tenant, and we're going to go look at legacy protocols at Journey Team. Okay. Sign-ins, and let's look in the last 24 hours, client app, and let's go pick some apps. We're going to go POP, SMTP, IMAP, other clients, apply. Okay, so how do we tell what's going on here? Is that too little? what's real legit stuff and what's not. Okay, I can see the username here. Usually the failed attempts here are crap. So what I'll then do is I'll go add another filter and I'll go look for the status of success. Where is this actually successfully being used? If you haven't blocked it today, go see where it's successfully being used, because there will be bad guys and bots just pounding you all the time. I don't care about all that noise. Okay. So in the last 24 hours, I've had 3 authentications from my SMTP relay service account coming from 3 different IP addresses: Utah, Chicago, and Des Moines. Okay. And so if I drill into this, right, I can see that he was using Exchange Online services here. Okay. And conditional access, these are my CA policies that may or may not be applied here. My block legacy authentication except from trusted groups, right? That was not applied because this SMTP relay account really does need to use legacy protocols. Okay, so that's the way to find out who's successfully using it. So Kevin, hope that helps. I don't care about all the failed login attempts, because like I said, this is most likely all just noise and junk. Okay, and it's hitting all kinds of people in my tenant. We've got lots of users. Notice the countries these are all coming from. Like I said, this is where I tell you, usually it's hard not to see this in a tenant. Okay, did that help?
Yeah, did you see the question from Rusty in chat?
Oh, let me get over to chat. I can do that over here. I did not, but I'm looking now. What about copiers? They use legacy to send. Does anyone have a way to use 365 to send email from copiers? Okay, so that's the example I showed you in my tenant over here, Rusty, was specifically the use case of the multifunction scanner copier that needed to scan to email, and how do we appropriately lock them down. I'm not aware that the copiers have switched to modern authentication. It's really hard for them to do that, to do an interactive authentication flow from a copier to the user's identity. Right? Their best approach to getting connectivity to Exchange Online is to use password based, is to use a different method, an API call, to get the message into Exchange versus the SMTP protocol. So they'd have to completely switch off the protocol. Okay, and then they would use like an OAuth flow with an OAuth access token, that they could use a client credential flow or some other way to get that. But I don't know that copiers have gone down that road at all. Okay, so best answer right now, Rusty, is to use a really good password. Okay, then you can put in a conditional access policy that only lets legacy protocols from specific IPs or from trusted locations. So if a bad guy gets that password and uses it from anywhere other than where that device is sitting, he would be blocked.
So Eric,
okay.
If you do that, that tells me that you're leaving the protocol turned on at your tenant and then blocking it at conditional access. And so that would let the bad guy put it in and then block it. And the alternative is, if we've turned that off, when they hit that port, they just get talk to the hand.
Correct.
And
so you're right.
That's a pretty big difference.
Big difference, exactly. So all of the and this is where it took Microsoft an extra year to be able to block legacy protocols at the identity layer, because they had to get the physical pipes and plumbing and infrastructure in place to route the authentication traffic all through Azure AD. Okay, so if you're ever wondering why the freak it took Microsoft so long to be able to block legacy protocols, that was why. They had all this infrastructure to physically route authentication requests and take the dependencies off of the direct services and run it through Azure so that they could block it at the protocol/identity layer. Okay, so you're right. You leave SMTP turned on at the service layer, block it at the conditional access layer, and let them come in there. Another good point, David Johnson, I see there, use internal SMTP relay. Point your applications to on-prem SMTP relay services, and then they don't have to authenticate to relay off of the cloud. via a receive connector inside Exchange Online. I've done that lots as well. Okay. All right. So legacy protocols, MFA's turned on, but these totally bypass them. So that's why this is a big deal for you. Any other questions or discussions on that? All right. Oh, let's build the CA policy that actually blocks this. Okay, so let's go look over here. What do I have in this demo tenant? Conditional access. I think my demo tenant is neutered. Yeah. Dang it, guys. I'd have to get into another demo tenant. This demo tenant's been around long enough that Microsoft says, okay, time to spin up another one. It's been a year, I guess, since I've had it. Anyway.
Maybe able to step in here to help, Eric. I can get you some demo tenant stuff in about 2 minutes to a live one if you want it.
Okay. Is this a new one you're building or one you've already got?
Pre-existing.
Hold on. You know what? I've got another way.
Sounds reasonable.
Hold on. I can go right here and I can jump to this guy. Okay. So this is one other place I can demo this. All right. Security, Azure Active Directory, conditional access. And so if we build a new policy
here. Why did you not see an MFA there? I'm shaking my finger at you because there was no MFA there.
This is my demo tenant. Rules don't apply to my demo tenant. There's nothing here I care about. Yeah, my production tenant, not that way. Okay, so we let's say block legacy protocols. What am I going to target? All users. What am I going to exclude? What's the number one rule when you build a conditional access policy? You should always exclude what? Anyone know?
Break glass accounts.
Bingo. Well said. Break glass account. I don't have one called break glass, but you guys get it. You exclude your break glass account, cover your butt account. Okay, so just get that in habit. So I'm going to include all users. Okay, I'm then going to select, choose all cloud apps. And then I'm going to go to the conditions and the client apps. I'm going to configure that. And I'm going to choose these legacy authentication clients. Okay, and then the action I'm going to take is not a grant, it's a block. Okay, don't get burned with this little feature down here. Sometimes it's off the page. You understand that what you're doing and you've excluded another account, and so I'll create this policy. Not pick my all users. Oh, there we go. All users, exclude. There we go. And that's it. That's the policy that blocks legacy protocols. Okay? All right. Next, guest access. Okay, I like to have some fun with this one. Here's the default posture in your tenant for guest accounts. How many guest accounts are in a tenant, right? Is something that everyone should know. By default, guests can share items they don't own. I can share content with anyone anonymously, including guests. Guests can invite other guests to a tenant by default. This is actually recently changed, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but teams now can have guests in them by default. It used to not be that case, but now this is on by default. And my favorite setting, restrict access to the Azure AD portal, is set to no by default. And that means guests can do some cool things. I'll demo that to you. Okay. So that's the default posture of a Microsoft tenant in SharePoint, Azure AD, and Teams. Okay. So why do you care about this? The ability to switch directory in the Azure portal lets you access the tenant your account as a guest in. You can then, let's have some fun. So this is a live demo here. So I'm going to get back over to which browser? Let's see here. This is my Journey Team tenant. Okay. So if I go to myapps.microsoft.com and I'm a guest in a few directories. That's the nature of the beast as being a consultant, right? Wait for it, it'll load, I think. So how do you find out where you have a guest account? Anyone know that? Like you've got a work account, right? You use it for Office 365. Where is that a guest account? Wow. This is really loading nicely. Like I said, I love live demos.
No idea.
Isn't it somewhere like under your profile if you go there and you go to security and you can see where you're connected?
Yeah. Okay. So if you go from my apps and go to no, let's go here. There we go. So let's try that in this browser. Okay, there we go. So aka.ms/mysecurityinfo, this is where your MFA methods are set up, okay? If you go to organizations over here, this is going to show you the organizations that Eric is a member of into other tenants, okay? And so you can then leave that organization if you want, and you can remove yourself from that guest tenant, okay? But why do I care about this? Well, if I go back to here and I switch directories, and let's just have some fun here. I'm going to jump into the Microsoft Production Azure Active Directory because I'm a guest. I've been invited to participate in a Microsoft team. So now I'm in Microsoft's instance of Azure Active Directory here. Okay, Microsoft. This is just real world stuff, right? This is kind of cool. They've got this Azure preview, report a bug, but I can now go into their Active Directory. And what can I learn about Microsoft's tenant? I can see their tenant ID. That's not a big deal. That's anonymously accessible stuff. I can see users. You're kidding me, right? I can see Microsoft's users. Okay, at least they blocked that, right? Groups. No, I can't see groups. But I can start poking around in the Microsoft tenant with my Journey Team guest account. Okay, this is where it gets fun. I can look at most of everything in here is locked down, except for this particular door here is a really fun one to look at. So they're custom domain names. Okay, so what are all the domains that are in Microsoft's tenant? Well, here they are, page after page after page. Okay, and I can see which ones are federated authentication, which ones are verified, which are unverified. So that Microsoft probably doesn't need me to know about this as a guest user in their tenant. Okay, so this is one of the things where I care about what guests can do, and it goes back to this restrict access to the admin portal, which we'll talk about some other settings in the Azure portal as well. Okay, so that was some fun there on demoing guest accounts. So how to govern these guest accounts. This does require Azure AD P2 to do access reviews, and this is an important point I want you to understand. There's these things called access packages. And how many of you look at this interface and go, this is really cool, managing the life cycle of external users. I can block the external user from signing into this directory. I can remove the user after 30 days, right? This is sweet. This only applies if the guest account came into your directory through this special thing called an access package, okay? I'll talk about those a little bit more, but that's one of the places of doing this. There's another way that I like to deal with guest accounts, and that's through an access review policy, and I'll show you that here in a second. But to finish the slide deck out, this is the tech tip, how to remove yourself, right? myaccount.microsoft.com. You can see the organization, you can leave it. So that's kind of a cool setting there, okay? So let's talk about an access review policy here, okay? So if I go look at, let's see here, where's my browser here? Now I'm losing which browser I'm open when. Okay, so I don't want this one. Let's minimize that. And let's go back to window here. I want this guy. All right, so how do you keep guest accounts cleaned up in your tenant? Okay, this is my demo tenant here. So if I go to identity governance and I create an access review, okay, I'm going to create an access review. I'm going to walk you through it. So I'm going to review the members of a team or a group. I can also review applications, but I'll get into that later. I'm going to select my specific group. So which group do I have? How many of you have a group that has all of your guest users in it? If not, let me go see if I have one in this tenant. So one of the things I always like to have all my customers do is to create a group in their tenant that contains all guest accounts. I don't think I have one here. Nope. Okay, so we're going to go build a group here. Ready? So I'm going to call this a security group, all guests. All guests in the tenant. I don't need roles here. It's not assigned, it's dynamic. And the membership of this group is going to be add an expression. Whoop, I want this property. User type. Get rid of this section. User type equals guest. Okay. And save that. And then I'll create this group. So I just created a dynamic Azure AD group that contains all guest accounts in my tenant. Okay, all guests. And I'm waiting for the squirrels to run around behind the scenes and populate the membership of this group. So we'll give that a second. Okay, just taking a quick look here, how many guests do I actually have here? User type is guest. If I have any guests in this tenant. So just a few guest accounts. So there's 4 here. Okay, so this group will end up with 4 people in it. Okay, hope that's a little cool tech tip. So now when I'm going over here, I can search for all guests, and I'm going to target my access review to this group called all guests. And that's the group, and I can say I just want guest users who are all in there, so that's fine. And I want them to review their own access versus somebody else in the business having to review who's in this group. And I want this to happen quarterly. And I'm going to give them 25 days to answer the access review. And it's going to start on this date. That's great. And I'm going to apply the results. If the users don't respond, I'm going to take recommendations. And instead of removing the user from the group, which I can't because it's dynamic, I'm going to block the user's signing for 30 days and then remove the user from the tenant. This is the magic little setting that lets us manage guest accounts. okay, in a dynamic group. So block their sign in for 30 days and then whack them out of the tenant. Okay, so that's the cool tech tip for managing guest accounts. No sign in for 30 days. This is the recommendation. If the user hasn't signed in, then this helps the reviewer make a decision. It doesn't really apply when you review yourself, but if someone else was reviewing the group, it would say, I recommend them to be removed because they haven't done anything. So that's what that is. People have to have a justification to stay in the group or to stay retained access, reminders, sure, email notifications. You are going to be removed if you do not need access in the file. Okay. Give it a name, description, and I can create this access review. So what's going to happen is in my demo tenant, these guest users here are going to get an email saying, please review access to your Journey Team guest account. Okay. And if they don't get it, so if I look at one of these accounts, the sign in is not blocked. So they would block their sign in here. And then 30 days later, it would nuke this account. Okay. So that's 2 tips wrapped in one. All right. Any questions on guest accounts or access review on guest accounts?
Question in the chat.
All right, let me get back to see that. Sorry, I put the screens here. What licensing does all guest users process require? Ooh, Azure AD Premium P1 is what's needed to create dynamic Azure AD groups. That's all you gotta have, okay? And for the record, here's the little secret. You only need 1 license in the tenant to create dynamic Azure AD groups. Okay, I didn't tell you that. All right.
Hey, Eric, that was really cool. But I wonder why we would limit it to only guests. What if we built a dynamic group that triggered after somebody had not logged in for a certain period of time that was a regular tenant person and did the same thing? Would that be a good idea or a bad idea?
That would be a fantastic idea. However, there's one little minor gotcha you've got there. So when I create a new group and I make it dynamic, this is a user class group. I can do dynamic device groups, so all iPads or all iOS or all Android or all Windows 10 devices, right? But we're talking user objects here. What are the available attributes that I can leverage in a dynamic group? And that's where you're going to hit a brick wall on that concept, Kevin. Okay, so you can see the list here. Right? These are all base schema out of Azure Active Directory of what I can create a dynamic group on. So I'm looking for a login date. Think it's going to be here? Nope.
I'm guessing not based on where you've taken us.
Exactly. So one little tech tip, if you've extended Azure AD schema by syncing attributes from AD into Azure through Azure AD Connect, they will show up here. There'll be extension attribute underscore blah, 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 underscore name of attribute. I haven't done that in this demo tenant, but if you've extended Azure AD schema by taking and saying, I want to sync UID or any other attribute in AD that's not in Azure, you can extend Azure schema and the sync engine will push it up. You can target them. So that's your one way to possibly solve that, right?
Okay.
If you want a dynamic rule that's targeting an attribute.
I see a hand up from Paul. Do you have a question, Paul?
Yeah, I'm assuming that some of these things you're showing us, the stars have to all be aligned quite right. Because I'm not able to access myaccess.microsoft.com with my guest account. And when I try and view the Azure Active Directory of a tenant that my guest account is used in, I get a no access message.
That client's probably one of my customers. So what I tell all of my clients to do is go into and I'm getting ahead a little bit, but I'll show you where this is. But if you go into user settings, and you set this to yes, you can't do what I showed you I was doing inside Microsoft's tenant as a guest account. So Microsoft has not checked this box right here and hit save in their production tenant. I recommend for all my clients going in and hitting yes to restrict access to the Azure AD portal, and that prevents guest accounts from doing what I did over there. Okay, so that's why if you're a guest in a tenant and you're trying to go and you can still switch directories, but you'll hit a brick wall really fast. Does that make sense?
I'm guessing the my account part is that you have to have a corporate registered account. Mine's just a plain old Microsoft account.
Oh, a personal Microsoft account?
Yeah.
Yes, those are different animals. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I can't.
Yeah,
it doesn't even let me try to log into my access.
yeah, that makes perfect sense with personal Microsoft accounts. That's like me going into my Outlook.com account and going to my Access in Microsoft going, excuse me, you've left the reservation. You're into the corporate world, pal, right? And that doesn't exist here. Okay.
Cool.
All right, cool. All right, so let's go back to our deck. Tap, tick, remove yourself. This applies to work or school accounts specifically. Okay. All right, let's jump on to enterprise apps. This is one of my favorite features, and there's a lot behind this.
Eric,
keep me on track. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, before you jump, do you know of a way, this came up today, in like crisis moments, is there a way to target people who are currently located in a building? Is that an attribute on a user?
Absolutely.
Is it?
It can be if you've done your identity management right.
Are you
Currently
this is
located
incredible.
in a building?
Yes, currently located. Not that you've listed the building that you work in, but you're currently there.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can have that discussion. So what you're saying is when a person in a business, maybe they're on a campus and there's lots of buildings or whatever, right? And they walk into building A on Microsoft's campus. How do I know they're in building A? Can we integrate that to the identity system? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Do you know of a way to do it?
Sorta. It's probably not really ready for the enterprise, but let me explain where my mind goes. You would have to integrate to the badging system that you use to badge tap into the building to gain access through the front door. So we have to have something that tracks what building the user walked into. Okay, so that's one door you could go through. So you'd have to integrate the security system for the doors, and with this identity, which is tied to this Active Directory account, and now I will set the building code in extension attribute 12 that says you're in this building, but that's not very real time. Right, you got to wait for that to get set. You got to wait for it to sync. You got to wait for dynamic groups to run around the squirrels and say you're in this room, and you just left the building, and now it's starting all over. So I don't like that for an enterprise approach. Okay, so a better option would be to do a real-time API integration with said building system that directly sticks you in a group in the cloud, a cloud mastered group that you're hitting an API, the Graph API, to go stick Tom, Dick, or Harry in a group. Okay, don't use the Active Directory synchronization or stick it on their user object. Go put them in groups real time and switch that around. Okay, I would take that approach for better real time access. Now, having said all that, then you would ask the question of what's the real world use case of how I would leverage that group, for what conditional access policies. I need to hear the business use case of why I care why you're in that building. If it's a communication thing, then maybe I need to send a text or something to people in a specific building, right? Then I wouldn't necessarily use the groups in Azure AD to do that because I'm not going to be sending text messages out of this, right? Dynamic teams, that could be really weird to try to have dynamic teams based on who's in a building. I can see that maybe happening, but it's not going to be real time enough is the problem.
So Noah, what you need to do is you need to use the tracking chips the government puts in when we get our vaccines.
Bingo. Perfect.
Or just
Okay.
wait for Neuralink and tap right into their brain.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric. Thank you.
No,
I was trying to noodle on that one, and I know that we can do it with the Amber Alert and SMS, but that's a different technology. There, you're connecting to a cell tower, and
Yep.
I thought about reverting back to my networking days and doing net send to an IP range, right? But
Right. Yeah, it's just you need something real time and API driven, and then therefore what's the business problem you're solving? Yeah. So
are you saying ATI or API?
API.
API. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Eric.
I was just joking with somebody yesterday that we could replace the active shooter training with something else because nobody's in the office.
Perfect. Yep. All right, cool. Okay, let's get back to our deck here. Enterprise apps. Okay, this is fun stuff. So enterprise apps, let me get through the deck and then we'll go demo. Default enterprise apps posture. Okay, so when I talk about enterprise apps, let me first just make sure everyone is level set on what we're talking about here. I'm in my JT demo tenant. So when I go look at enterprise apps in a directory, yes, I'll discard that. This is the framework that Microsoft has for integrating apps for single sign-on and API access. Okay, you'll see a bunch of Microsoft apps in a tenant. So SharePoint's listed here, Exchange Online, those kind of things, right? I could look up specifically for Microsoft applications, blah, blah, blah. So this is a framework. It's not going away. It's important to understand what these things are and how they affect your security posture. Very important. Okay, so here's a real world example. One of my favorite tools is lucidchart.com. That's where I do all my diagramming and flowcharts and all that kind of stuff. And if I go to Lucidchart and I hit sign in here, they have this nifty little crap. Dang it. I gotta do this. Okay, we're gonna live really dangerously. You know what I just did, guys? I rebooted my browser. And then I got. Give me just a second.
While you're at it, can you reboot Kevin too?
Not quite. Hold on.
You're on mute, Kevin. I want to hear what you said.
You don't, because it was just a smart ass remark. So just like always.
All right, let's go back here. And then I'm gonna go get into my JT demos, yes. Okay. Lucidchart.com, log in. All right, I gotta sign out here. I got a session going on here. Come on, buddy. This would be an app specific session I've got here. Okay, let's try this again. Log in. I've got this nifty Office 365 button. So I go through that. I get. All right, we're gonna try this one more time. Sign in here. Office 365. Eric.Raff@journeyteam.com because I know this password faster than the other one. But wait, I don't have to do password. So I do my authentication here, 61. And when I stay signed in, that's fantastic, right? I just used Lucidchart to do authentication with my Journey Team account, and here I am. Okay, so the point of what this is that instantiates a enterprise app for me in Office in the Azure AD. Okay, so over here, what you'll see on these enterprise apps is that by default, users can consent to these applications, okay? And so if I go back to my slide deck here, hold on. If I go back to my application, this is the consent piece that people will get to get permission for a third-party app to read stuff out of my data, out of my tenant. This could be reading my own profile data. If you ever see this option here to consent on behalf of your organization, be very aware of what it's going to do if you check that box. You only will see this option here to consent on behalf of your org if you're a global admin or a enterprise app administrator that can consent for everybody in the tenant, which means the next user that goes to sign into this app won't be prompted to consent and is already carte blanche allowed to get in, okay? So why do you care about this? If I was a bad guy, this is how I would get access to your data. I wouldn't try to phish your account. I wouldn't try to guess your password. I would just entice users to go to my nice little web app that said sign in. They got this pretty little consent. I would even say I was a legit application from Microsoft, like Planner or something fun like that, right? And I would get access to at least the user's data, because I would ask for a bunch of permissions and the user would have no idea what they're granting me access to, how many people are going to really look at this and see what this is doing and say, no, I don't want to do this, okay? So gotta get a user to consent to my Kitty application that asks for permission. The user has no idea why they're granting me access to this. I can name my app anything. I can make the publisher anything that I want, and away I go. So this is there's some new consent governance experience in the Microsoft 365 environment, okay? So if we look at this here, if we go to this enterprise apps and go to consent and permissions, okay, you can allow users to consent for apps from verified publishers for selected permissions, okay? So sure, I'll let users consent to things here, but only if, let me say that, only if they have these permissions. They can read the user's profile, they can read the user's email, and sign the user in. Great. Yes, I'll select those permissions. And so if I have an app that's from a verified publisher that's only doing this, I will let the user consent. Okay. Otherwise, you can't use that app. Okay. So a lot of times I would tell clients, just go in here and do not allow users to consent. It's going to shut the door on all of these apps that may show up in your tenant. That's really heavy-handed and it kills kind of a bunch of the third-party app integrations with Azure AD for single sign-on. Okay. So that's a cool feature here, but how many verified publishers exist in the wild today? The number's very, very low. 2, yeah. Okay, that's the peace sign too, right? Yeah, it's quite a low number. So this really isn't going to move the dial very much. As much as this sounds awesome in the real world, it's not going to move your dial very much to take off the burden from people consenting to things. Okay. So the other place that you need to understand is in user settings, right here, admin consent requests. This is pretty cool here. Okay. If you say users can request admin consent to apps, if you change this to yes, which is what I would recommend, select users to review the admin consent, then this is where you define your IT people that are going to be notified when a user tries to go use Lucidchart and consent to it. And they then can say, yes, you can use this app. And you know what? I see a lot of people using this, so I'll consent to the entire business and provide admin consent. Okay. Here's the little gotcha here. And this ties into another tech tip that I'll give you about admin roles. When I pick someone here, they have to be a global administrator, the application administrator, or cloud application administrator to grant consent. that role has to be on the user at the time that the consent comes in, or you don't get the email that says you need to go review who wants access to this application. Okay, so therefore you need permanent role assignments in preferably the cloud application administrator or the application administrator to provide the consent for users. But I could pick my account here. Then Hank is going to get an email whenever someone tries to go use a third-party app, and the users have to users receive an email when they get notified of this, and they'll receive request expiration reminders, and this is going to last for 2 weeks, right, like here, right? And the user gets a little prompt. We have this in a screenshot. Let's go back and look over here. Users have this as a prompt that will show what they get for enterprise apps. Nope, I don't. Okay, so that's something really helpful. Knowing what you have in your enterprise apps environment and how you can govern them so that not everything is wide open inside your tenant is really, really helpful. Okay. Any questions around that? All right, cool. I'm going to discard this from my demo tenant. Leave it out. Okay, so let's go back to next point, which is using MCAS as a second layer. This is pretty cool. My MCAS is Microsoft's Cloud App Security Broker. And if you get these apps that are in your tenant that are high risk, this is one of my favorite alerts here, right? So this is known as the OAuth access policy. If you have an app that the permission levels equal very high and the community use is not common, so I'm a bad guy and I've built my app and I've got you to consent to it, right? And MCAS says, okay, you wanted a bunch of permissions. I don't really know what this app is. It's got very low usage for community use, meaning it's a commonly used app. It does not equal a commonly used application. Then I'm going to send an alert right now to who? I can text my phone if I want. And then down here, I can revoke the access to the app. And so this is MCAS actually going into Azure Active Directory and finding the application here, right, and disabling it, okay? And so that's what MCAS can do, and it will specifically disable this app that had lots of permissions it was asking for, and it will go into here and disable it here. Boop. And then that blocks the user from using that third-party app, okay? So that's the MCAS policy that you can use to also act as another layer of governing your enterprise apps. Okay. All right, what else do I got here? Azure portal settings. 2 settings here. I've already talked about this: restrict access to the admin portal, yes or no. And if it's set to no, then guest accounts can see stuff inside your directory. Okay. Another important thing to be aware of is just the name of your tenant. Okay. Whatever the name of your tenant is what's going to show up when people do their OneDrive sync integrations. Okay, I've seen tenant names that are completely retarded. Specifically, back in the day when Microsoft would build a tenant named default directory, and that would be the name of the tenant. And so when you would connect OneDrive to it and sync that, or send out guest account invitations, it's welcome to the default directory. You've been invited to the default directory. So just make sure your tenant name is good. Okay, that's pretty simple. All right, time check. How am I doing, Kevin? Are we up at 5:30?
We normally stop whenever our presenter runs out of steam.
Oh, all right. I better get moving then.
We've had a few folks bail out at the top of the hour, which is about when most presenters make. But I think we're doing good.
I'll hustle. All right, cool. PIM. If you don't know what PIM is, this is an Azure AD P2 feature. It's a really slick thing. Let me demo this to you in our real production environment over here. Okay, so if I jump back to my regular profile here, portal.azure.com, and I go to Azure Active Directory here, you'll see my current role inside Azure Active Directory as a Journey Team employee is nothing special. Okay, you'll see that I'm a global reader. I do that so that I can see stuff without having to PIM, but I can't change a thing. So if I do need to make changes, if I need an admin role, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, I pop into this little blade, go to my roles, and I'm eligible to become any of these roles. If I need to be the global administrator, then I can activate this role. It's going to make sure that I have an MFA authenticated session to Azure AD, which I do. I can request this role for a max of 10 hours. I only need it for 2. My reason is demo of PIM functionality, and I can activate this role. Okay, so this is going to send an email to several people saying Eric just activated his global administrator role in the Journey Team tenant. Okay, if I wasn't MFA'd in this session, I would have had the MFA to activate the role. And so it's going to go through and make sure that I'm that the various services inside Microsoft 365 know that now I have the global administrator role. Okay. And then the final section here is it's going to refresh my browser in 3, 2, 1, bloop. There we go. And I just became a global administrator. I didn't have it prior to this meeting. I just got it, right? If I go back to Azure Active Directory and look at my roles here now, I'm a global administrator with my one other role, global reader. Now I'm God of the tenant, okay? So PIM is a really cool thing. With PIM, I can know exactly who has what role and when they turn that role on, and it's gonna go away after that length of time, okay? So if I'm done with my role here, I can go look at my active assignments here, and I'm a global administrator. I can deactivate this because I no longer need this role, and I'll turn that role off, okay? I can only deactivate roles that I elevated. The permanent role I can't turn off, obviously, because it's turned on all the time. Okay, so that's cool, fun stuff on PIM. You can clearly get to see who has what Azure AD roles when. Okay, here's the cool tip of the day. Inside PIM, if you go to Azure AD roles here and look at the actual roles in a tenant, there's a bunch of roles in Azure Active Directory, and they keep growing. If I were to ask you, how do you go get all of the users in your tenant and what roles they have in your tenant? The fastest, easiest, best way to do it is through this PIM door, because I can go here and I can export. And this is going to give me a beautiful little CSV file of who's got what role in my tenant. Okay, let me pull this up. Come on. Okay. So you can see who has the assignment, which name, what role they have, what their email, how they got it. And this is everyone in my tenant that may have a role here. Okay. So great little report to get who has what role. Okay. All right. Let's go back to here. That's PIM. MCAS policy, I talked about this, the OAuth app policy for high-risk apps, and it will block those high-risk apps. Conditional access policy for admin roles. Highly, highly recommend you do this. So let me go here. So if you go back to here and go to conditional access policy, this is simply the idea that I can have a conditional access policy that is require MFA and compliant device for admin roles. Okay, who am I going to select? I'm going to select specific roles, and I start ticking these boxes here. Okay, there's a bunch of roles. I usually tick almost all of these roles. Okay, there's some that I may not, like some of the reader roles or some of the service desk roles, but you get the idea. For sure, you're going to pick your big heavy hitters like global administrator, exchange administrator, SharePoint administrator, those kind of things, okay? So you go through, you pick your roles, and you then come down to here to say, I don't care what app you're using, if you have one of these roles, I don't care what conditions you're coming from, but you have to have both multi-factor and your device has to be compliant. Of course, you'd exclude your break glass account. Okay. And now for anyone in those roles, they have to have this security posture to do administrative stuff. Okay. That's a little bit about CA policy for admin roles, native integration between Azure AD and Azure Login Analytics. Okay, this is a really, really, really big deal. If in your tenant, when you go look at sign-in logs, sign-ins here, you see only 7 days or 24 hours and you don't see 1 month, that tells me you don't have Azure AD Premium in your tenant. All you need is 1 license of Azure AD Premium to get logs for a month. So that's why I basically highly recommend, almost require that any of my customers have 1 Azure AD Premium license in their tenant, because then I get logs for a month for the whole tenant. Now that's only a month though. What if I need logs longer than a month? Okay. Back here. All right, that's all I had there. So let me go back. So back here, there's the ability here that you can go to logs and you can export your logs. Okay, I'm gonna have to demo this in my production tenant. So if I go back to Azure AD here and I go to my logs, I can see that I can integrate my Azure, oh, not here. Version logs, nope, nope, nope. Diagnostic settings, come on, Eric. This browser is going to start, that's fine. This browser is going to start figuring out that I'm not pinned in anymore. So this is where I can go through this diagnostic setting and I can create an Azure Log Analytics workspace and I can easily, so sending my logs to the Azure storage account, GT log storage. If I edit these settings here, all I have to do is say send my audit logs, my sign-in logs, my non-interactive sign-in logs, my service principal logs, managed identity, provisioning logs, send them to this Azure subscription, to the log archiving workspace, and I can also send them off to a storage account. Looking at these logs from the storage account is super ugly and painful, but looking at them through Log Analytics workspace is fantastic. And I now am keeping my logs forever. Okay, so this is super important. If I ever wanted to track down sign-ins or changes to the tenant, who did what when, I've got this data forever in my Log Analytics settings. Okay, and that is what I had to go over, everyone. Thank you for those that stayed late, the end. Thank you. And
I would like to point out that Noah cost us a good 15 minutes in the middle with that GPS thing, so we're going to blame it on Noah.
Sure. No, I appreciate those of you that hung out with me here, and I hope this was helpful. Those are some of the security things that you need to look at inside a tenant.
I will say that
once you got MFA.
I will say that there were 3 or 4 or more things that you said that I thought, ooh, I got to go do that. And so if nobody else found it useful, I found it useful. Thank you. We have JR's hour that we spent on MFA last month that I need to publish to YouTube, and we'll publish this as well. And I now have an incentive so I can go back and watch all the stuff again that I need to go and check in my tenant. And so as long as I'm doing that, I'll publish it so I can do it on YouTube. Before we run away, and there was a note from Greg about Ignite coming up. Greg? Whatever that was, March
2nd through 4th.
Oh, that's next week.
Yeah.
They've got the schedule up now too, so go check it out.
Oh.
And it's free and you don't have to travel, which kind of makes me sad because I wanted to go to Orlando.
Yeah.
Or New Orleans, which is where the last one was canceled. Anyway, if I think about it, I may put a note out saying come join us in a virtual session at Ignite. You can certainly do that yourself as well. One more plea, if you have any topics that you think we should cover in the month of March, let me know. If we don't get any topics, we will do an Ignite recap, and nobody wants that. So give me a topic and let's get something good. Eric, thank you for the time that you took to prepare that and deliver it. It was totally awesome, and And we all feel like we have been fed by Raff, and so thank you.
All right.
Any
Well,
last
thanks for your
comments or
patience.
questions?
And
It was awesome. Any last comments or questions before we run away?
Yeah, question. I just
Yeah.
gotta. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying, yeah, go ahead and ask the question. Gotcha. I thought you said see it. I got an email about 45 minutes ago from another team member saying the Microsoft Ignite sessions often fill up quickly, so I suggest getting registered for them ASAP. They fill up.
So there are
There's
two
one.
types of sessions typically at Ignite. There's the all hands, anybody come and we're going to yammer at you for 30 minutes or 45. Those don't fill up, but there are others that are more workshoppy, that are more interactive, and you build things together, and those fill up and are probably already filled up. And so go and on the Ignite selector, there's typically a variety of session types. And so click on the session that says workshop or interactive or something like that. And those are the ones you want to grab first because they will fill up.
I think
Did we
your
answer
grandson
question?
is.
He's fascinated that he can see himself in the little corner right here, and he's telling me stories. And I'm glad that while I'm talking, he's kind of put the stories on pause. But my grandson is very cute, and I'm glad to have him.
I thought he was playing with hand tracking and AR.
No, he was watching his hand on the screen and thought it was cool. This is Flynn.
Hi, Flynn.
Say hi.
Hi, Flynn.
They're here every Tuesday, and then Tuesday's one of the best days of the week. All right. Thanks again for everybody for coming. One last plea for you to spread the word. Let's share the knowledge that is MUGUT. I will watch for you in the halls of Ignite next week, and we'll see you at the end of March. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thanks, Eric. See ya.
You bet. See you guys.